state of Texas plans to execute Carl Wayne Bunchen for the 1990 murder of Houston police officer James Irby.
You also talked to Bunchen on death row.
The last 24 hours of a death row prisoner's life are steeped in gravity and a myriad of emotions. These final moments, often secluded from the public eye, encapsulate a complex web of legal, moral, and human questions. As we delve into this solemn journey, we uncover the rituals, interactions, and reflections that constitute the final countdown, painting a poignant picture of the twilight hours before a state-sanctioned execution. Historical context of capital punishment. Capital punishment, commonly referred to as the death penalty, has been a part of human civilization's justice system for millennia. From ancient civilizations to the modern era, the practice has been both embraced as a means of retribution and deterrent, and criticized for its moral implications and potential for irreversible error. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest known legal documents inscribed in ancient Babylon around 1754 BCE, already had provisions for capital punishment for certain offenses. Similarly, ancient civilizations such as the Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans employed the death penalty, albeit with varying degrees of frequency and for different crimes. For the Greeks, it was used in cases of treason or espionage, while the Romans expanded its use, including for certain acts of theft or fraud. During the medieval period in Europe, public executions were not merely punitive measures, but also served as a form of public spectacle and deterrent. Beheading, hanging, and even quartering were common methods. Witch hunts, religious heresies, and perceived threats against the crown could all lead to the death penalty. The nature of the crime often determined the method of execution. For instance, burning was reserved for heretics and those accused of witchcraft. As the Renaissance dawned and gave way to the Enlightenment, there was increasing scrutiny of capital punishment. Philosophers such as Cesare Beccaria in Italy and Voltaire in France began to argue against the death penalty on both moral and practical grounds. Beccaria, in his seminal work On Crimes and Punishments, 1764, postulated that the death penalty was neither a true deterrent nor a justifiable act of revenge. With the 19th and 20th centuries came changes in methods of execution. The electric chair, introduced in the United States in the late 19th century, was viewed as a more humane alternative to hanging. This was followed by the gas chamber, lethal injection, and firing squad. Each new method was introduced with the promise of being more humane than the last, but each has also been met with its share of controversy and criticism. Simultaneously, as methods evolved, the world became divided on the very principle of capital punishment. While some countries, like the United Kingdom, abolished the death penalty in the latter half of the 20th century, others, including China, the United States, and Iran, continue to implement it, albeit with significant differences in frequency and procedure. The psychological countdown. Navigating the psyche of a death row inmate as they approach the final 24 hours of their life is a complex endeavor, filled with layers of emotions, retrospection, and existential reflections. For many, the looming certainty of a predetermined end evokes a series of psychological responses that transcend the typical human experience. One of the most palpable emotions during the countdown is anticipatory grief. Unlike traditional forms of grief which follow the event of loss, this kind anticipates it. Inmates often grapple with the impending loss of their own lives, leading to intense periods of anxiety, sadness, and even anger. The cruel paradox is that they are mourning their imminent deaths while still alive, creating a unique emotional strain. Many inmates undergo deep introspection, confronting the actions that led them to death row. This period is often characterized by profound feelings of regret and remorse. Some inmates reach out to their victims' families, seeking forgiveness or trying to convey their own guilt and sorrow. For others, this reflection is internalized, leading to sleepless nights and a desire to make peace with their past. The isolation of death row compounds the psychological effects of the impending execution. While all inmates experience prison's inherent isolation, the intensity on death row is unparalleled. Knowing that one's days are numbered often leads to despair, with inmates feeling trapped in a relentless countdown, devoid of hope. As the hours dwindle, some inmates seek meaning in their existence and impending demise. They turn to religion, spirituality, or philosophy, seeking answers to life's biggest questions. It's not uncommon for death row inmates to experience a spiritual or philosophical renaissance, finding solace in faith or a higher purpose. For some, this is a source of strength, enabling them to face their fate with dignity and grace. As one would expect, every individual copes differently. Some engage in art, writing, or music, channeling their emotions and thoughts into these mediums. Others cling to routine, finding comfort in the mundane predictability of their final hours. And then there are those who retreat into their minds, seeking an escape from the harrowing reality outside. The finality of the legal process can serve as a triggering event. Once the last appeal is exhausted and the final verdict is delivered, many inmates face a dramatic shift in their mental health. The abstraction of death suddenly becomes tangible. The psychological toll can be immeasurable, with reports of self-harm, intense depressive episodes, and overwhelming anxiety being common among inmates during this period. Recognizing the immense psychological burden, many prisons have mental health professionals to support death row inmates. These professionals play a pivotal role, offering counseling, ensuring the inmate's mental well-being, and providing a semblance of understanding in an otherwise isolating environment. The physical space, prison facilities, and death watch cells. Capital punishment, while debated extensively for its ethical, legal, and moral implications, also carries with it an intricate physical infrastructure. The spaces in which death row inmates spend their final hours are designed with specific intent, each corner bearing silent witness to countless personal narratives of dread, reflection, and at times, reconciliation. Most prisons housing death row inmates are maximum security facilities. They have to be, given the nature of the inmates' crimes and the security concerns surrounding them. Thick concrete walls, barbed wire fences, and an ever-vigilant surveillance system are staples. But within this fortress-like setting lies an even more restricted space, the death watch cell. The transition from a regular death row cell to a death watch cell is significant. Death watch cells are typically located close to the execution chamber, a constant and chilling reminder of the inmate's impending fate. The proximity serves logistical purposes, minimizing the distance and potential disruptions when moving the inmate for the final procedure. But it also has profound psychological effects, confronting the inmate with the stark reality of their situation. These cells are often more sterile and isolated than typical death row cells. Where some inmates on death row may have had limited interaction or at least been able to hear or shout to fellow inmates, death watch cells are designed to minimize such interactions. The solitude is almost absolute, interrupted only by the occasional visits from prison staff, lawyers, or spiritual advisors. In terms of amenities, death watch cells are bare-boned. A bed, toilet, sink, and perhaps a table constitute the entirety of the cell's furnishings. Some prisons allow personal items, religious texts, or writing materials, but this varies from facility to facility. The lights, often harsh and artificial, are always on, making the passage of time difficult to gauge, blurring the lines between night and day. Beyond the cell's physical attributes, the atmosphere is palpable with tension. Guards posted outside maintain a constant watch, ensuring the inmate doesn't harm themselves or create any disruptions. Their presence, while necessary from a security standpoint, also serves as a constant reminder of the inmate's fate. The clock's ticking becomes more pronounced, every passing hour signaling the approach of the predetermined end. Adjacent to these cells is the execution chamber. While inmates in the death watch cell may not always see it, its presence is always felt. This room, designed for one grim purpose, is equipped based on the method of execution. Be it an electric chair, a lethal injection table, or a gas chamber, the room bears an eerie clinical look, juxtaposed with the solemnity of its purpose. The journey from the death watch cell to the execution chamber is a short one, but for the inmate, it can feel like an eternity. Every step echoes with finality, the cold floor serving as a stark reminder of the reality they're walking into. And when they finally enter, it's into a space that, despite its sanitized appearance, is steeped in history, emotion, and moral debate. Legal procedures and appeals. Capital punishment, being the ultimate penalty in the legal system, is accompanied by exhaustive legal proceedings. For inmates on death row, the journey is one of perpetual uncertainty, marked by a series of appeals, stays, and sometimes last-minute reprieves. As the final hours approach, the legal machine shifts into overdrive, reflecting society's struggle with the irreversible nature of the punishment. The judicial system in countries that employ the death penalty typically ensures multiple tiers of appeal processes for death row inmates. These measures aim to prevent the execution of an innocent individual and provide ample opportunity for any new evidence or legal arguments to come to light. While the process can span years, if not decades, the fervor and desperation often peak in the last 24 hours. These appeals are the final attempts made by an inmate's legal team to halt or delay the execution. They are often grounded in various factors: new evidence, potential juror misconduct, questions about the legality or constitutionality of the method of execution, or concerns about the inmate's mental health. Given the irreversible nature of the death penalty, courts generally consider these last-minute appeals with utmost seriousness, although they also view them skeptically, aware that some might be tactics to merely stall the execution. The frequency of such appeals is high. Almost every execution is preceded by a flurry of legal motions, petitions, and appeals, each vying for the attention of judges right up to the 11th hour. Sometimes these are successful, resulting in stays of execution that can last days, months, or even lead to the commutation of the death sentence. Other times, they simply delay the inevitable by a few hours. In the final hours leading to an execution, the role of defense lawyers becomes especially crucial. They are the last line of defense for the inmate, armed with legal expertise, determination, and often a deep-seated belief in the justice of their cause. These lawyers often work tirelessly, pulling all-nighters and navigating a maze of legal procedures, court jurisdictions, and ever-ticking clocks. Beyond the immediate legal maneuvers, defense lawyers also serve as a vital emotional support for the inmate. They might have been with the case for years, forging a bond with the inmate and witnessing firsthand the toll the prolonged legal battle takes. In the final moments, their role extends beyond the legal realm, providing reassurance, hope, and often the hard truth to the condemned. The court system, particularly the higher courts and supreme judicial bodies, becomes the epicenter of activity in the run-up to an execution. Judges are tasked with weighing the merits of last-minute appeals, each aware of the profound consequences of their decisions. It's a balance of ensuring justice for victims and society at large, and upholding the rights and dignity of the individual facing the ultimate penalty. In some instances, judges might call for emergency sessions, convening at odd hours to deliberate on an appeal. The decision-making process can be rapid, with judges relying on a combination of legal precedents, the specifics of the case at hand, and, inevitably, their own personal beliefs and moral judgments. The final hours of a death row inmate are not only a personal ordeal, but a reflection of the legal system's complexities and the societal values it upholds. As lawyers battle against time and judges grapple with decisions of life and death, the line between justice and finality becomes precariously thin. These final legal maneuvers underscore the gravity and permanence of capital punishment, serving as a potent reminder of the high stakes and moral dilemmas inherent in the system. Interactions and last visits. The final hours of a death row inmate, constrained by cold prison walls and the weight of impending finality, are punctuated by some of the most intimate, profound, and heartbreaking interactions. These final visits, permitted by prison administrations, are often the last moments of personal connection, a brief respite from the sterile environment, and a window into the rawest of human emotions. Prison systems, despite the punitive nature of capital punishment, recognize the importance of human connection, especially at the end of life. Consequently, final visits are an integral part of the process leading up to an execution. Inmates are typically allowed a designated period to meet with their loved ones. The specific duration, number of visitors, and the nature of interaction whether it's through glass partitions or physical contact, vary based on prison regulations and security concerns. The visitors usually comprise close family members, parents, siblings, children, and occasionally friends or advocates who have been part of the inmate's journey. For many families, this is the last opportunity to say goodbye, to express love, regret, forgiveness, or simply to hold their loved one's hand one last time. The weight of these moments is enormous, a culmination of years of shared memories, grief, and the looming shadow of a final parting. For friends and advocates, the visit is often a testament to loyalty, an act of solidarity, and sometimes a means to provide comfort and assurance, reminding the inmate that they are not entirely alone in their final moments. The emotional landscape of these interactions is vast and varied. Some visits are marked by profound sorrow, with tearful goodbyes, tight embraces, and shared memories. Others might bear undertones of anger, confusion, or regret, especially if the crime has left deep wounds within the family. Some families use this time for reconciliation, addressing long-held grievances and seeking closure. Conversely, there are moments of levity, laughter, shared jokes, and reminiscing about happier times. In the face of imminent loss, finding moments of joy, however fleeting, becomes a way to assert humanity and resilience. The content of the final conversations is as varied as the individuals involved. Many revolve around memories, revisiting shared experiences, and reliving moments of happiness. Parents might offer words of comfort, ensuring their child that they will be remembered and loved. Children, on the other hand, grapple with the complexity of saying goodbye, sometimes too young to fully comprehend the gravity of the situation. Inmates often use this time to express remorse, to seek forgiveness, or to offer words of advice. For some, it's an opportunity to share their wishes, entrust personal belongings to loved ones, or make last requests. However, not all interactions are verbal. The power of touch, of holding hands, of a final embrace speaks volumes. In a place where words often fall short, these physical gestures become the language of love, regret, and farewell. Last meal rituals. The last meal, a tradition deeply embedded in the narrative of capital punishment, is a final act of humanity granted to the condemned. It stands as a symbolic ritual, a gesture of compassion in the face of ultimate finality, and serves as a complex intersection of culture, psychology, and personal narrative. The concept of the last meal finds roots in ancient civilizations. Historically, it was believed that providing the condemned with a final feast would placate their spirit, ensuring they wouldn't return to haunt the living. This was not just about food, but a broader act of appeasement. The Greeks, for example, would offer libations to the dead, a way of pacifying the spirits and seeking protection from potential vengeful acts. Over the centuries, this ancient superstition evolved into a more secular tradition in many cultures. The reasons for offering a special last meal shifted from fears of the supernatural to acts of compassion and humanity. In the context of modern-day capital punishment, the last meal becomes a small concession, a nod to the idea that even in the gravest of punishments, there can be moments of kindness and dignity. In the United States, where the last meal ritual is extensively documented, the practice allows inmates to choose their final meal, albeit with certain limitations based on budgetary concerns, availability, and sometimes regulations set by the prison facility. Yet within these constraints, the choices made by inmates offer a deep dive into their psyche, their backgrounds, and sometimes the cultural milieu they come from. Some last meal requests are simple and austere: a slice of bread, a cup of coffee, or a piece of fruit. These modest choices might reflect the individual's acceptance of their fate, or perhaps a desire not to indulge in the face of impending death. Others, however, opt for lavish spreads, representing favorite foods or meals that carry a specific personal or cultural significance. Famous and unusual last meal requests have captured public imagination over the years, often serving as a point of discussion, intrigue, and sometimes judgment. A notable example is that of Victor Feguer, the last federal inmate executed in the U.S. before the moratorium in 1963, and again before the resumption of federal executions in 2020. Feguer requested a single olive with the pit intact, a choice that many believe symbolized peace or rebirth. Another compelling request came from Ronnie Lee Gardner in Utah, who chose steak, lobster tail, apple pie, and vanilla ice cream, but also requested to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy while eating. Gardner's choice seemed to be an attempt to lose himself, if only momentarily, in a different world, away from the stark reality of his impending execution. Then there are requests that are reflective of the individual's cultural background or personal history. Tamales, fried chicken, or a bowl of simple rice can evoke memories of home, family, and moments of past joy. However, it's worth noting that not all inmates choose to have a last meal. Some decline the offer, while others may opt for standard prison fare, emphasizing their connection with fellow inmates, or perhaps signaling their resistance to the system right till the very end. The last meal, while a simple ritual, carries layers of significance. It stands as a reflection of societal values, personal narratives, and the perpetual tension between punishment and compassion. The choices made, whether simple or extravagant, offer a lens into the soul of the condemned, a final statement before the curtain falls. Spiritual guidance and reflection. The dance with death, especially one so meticulously scheduled as an execution, evokes profound introspection, with many inmates turning to spirituality for solace, understanding, or redemption. This imminent confrontation with mortality fosters an environment rife with questions about existence, afterlife, and the nature of sin and salvation. Within this deeply intimate space, spiritual advisors and chaplains play a crucial role, providing a bridge between the material and the metaphysical, the mortal and the divine. Spiritual advisors, often from diverse religious backgrounds, are trained to work within the complex environment of prisons, particularly on death row. Their primary role is to offer spiritual guidance, allowing inmates to explore, understand, or reconcile with their faith or lack thereof. They do not impose beliefs but serve as compassionate listeners, guiding those who seek answers or simply yearn for spiritual companionship in their final hours. Chaplains, often viewed as spiritual anchors, also serve the prison staff, addressing their emotional and spiritual needs. The task of carrying out or witnessing an execution can have profound emotional repercussions, leading many staff members to grapple with moral quandaries. Chaplains, thus, offer a sanctuary, a space for reflection and healing, not just to the condemned, but to those involved in the machinery of capital punishment. For many death row inmates, the journey towards execution is marked by religious experiences that range from profound epiphanies to challenging confrontations with faith. Some find solace in scriptures, prayer, or meditation, leaning into the comforting embrace of a higher power. For them, faith offers a sanctuary, a space where the burdens of guilt, remorse, and fear find a counter in hope, forgiveness, or acceptance. These spiritual interactions sometimes lead to conversions. Historically, there have been instances where inmates, influenced by their interactions with spiritual advisors or personal reflections, have adopted new faiths or returned to religions they had distanced themselves from. These transformations are deeply personal, driven by a quest for redemption, understanding, or simply the human need to connect with something greater in the face of the abyss. However, the journey isn't always linear or comforting. Some inmates, when faced with the looming finality of death, grapple with doubts, questioning the existence of a divine entity or the notions of predestination and free will. These confrontations with faith can be tumultuous, with the inmate oscillating between belief and skepticism, hope and despair. Furthermore, there are inmates who, having lived secular lives, continue to approach their impending death without a religious lens. For them, spiritual advisors act as philosophers or counselors, helping them navigate the existential weight of their situation without the framework of organized religion. Regardless of the religious or philosophical inclinations of the inmates, these final hours often lead to reflections on life, choices, and the nature of existence. Some pen down their thoughts, leaving behind poignant letters or journals. Others engage in deep conversations with their spiritual guides, attempting to make sense of their journey or seeking to leave behind a legacy of wisdom, remorse, or hope. Final preparations and procedures. As the inexorable countdown nears its end, The final preparations and procedures for the execution are set in motion. It's a regimented process, meticulously planned and executed with precision, reflecting the gravity of the act. This clinical, procedural approach, juxtaposed against the emotional turmoil of the preceding chapters, offers a stark view of the machinery of capital punishment. The initial steps, invariably, involve a comprehensive health evaluation. While it may seem paradoxical to ensure the health of someone who is about to be executed, it serves multiple purposes. Primarily, it ensures that the method of execution can be administered without unforeseen complications. Furthermore, it provides a record, a testament that the state acted with due diligence, minimizing suffering. Following this, there's the matter of documentation. All legal avenues, including appeals and possible stays of execution, are reviewed and confirmed closed. The warden and key personnel receive the final go-ahead, which sets the rest of the procedures in motion.